this is like an interesting thing that I could see happening in the upcoming days. Is that so? At the start of all of this, Donald Trump, at the start of his whole entire presidency, Trump declares a national emergency. Illegal aliens and drugs, including deadly fentanyl, is coming across our northern and southern borders into America. And because after he declares this national emergency, he also uses the International Emergency Economic Powers Act from 1977, which grants the president broad authority to regulate economic transactions during a national emergency stemming from an unusual and extraordinary threat. So, after using that, he declares tariffs, the original tariffs. Notice that this is from February 1st. On Canada and Mexico and China, saying that they are smuggling in fentanyl to the entire US population. After he declares that, he immediately puts a pause on it until March, where he says that he's going to do this again, immediately puts a pause on it. Fast forward to April. Trump announces that he is going to do a whole new trade war with everybody. And that includes reciprocal tariffs. So that is China, the European Union, Vietnam, Taiwan, Japan, pretty much everybody except Russia, Mexico, and Canada. Now, that's interesting because the original reason that he was allowed to declare tariffs in the first place was because he declared a national emergency at the border. So now he's declaring that he's going to impose tariffs on countries that he never said were a problem importing drugs to our country. So, if you look back at the Senate just before he announced these reciprocal tariffs, they actually decided that they wouldn't let him to impose tariffs on Canada. The resolution passed by 51 to 48 with 4 Republicans and all Democrats in support. So the Senate has a majority on not liking tariffs, and then they went, like, the Senate and Congress went out for a week, and then the next day Trump announced these reciprocal tariffs. So there is a non-zero chance that the Senate and Congress both decide that they don't like these tariff ideas, and because Trump is already at the end of his whole entire use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act from 1977, he's already gone past that because he's not declaring a national emergency against every single country in the world. So there is a chance that Congress and the senators of the world could actually come in and say, dude, you're already pushing it with the use of the IEEPA from 1977, but now you've gone way past your reach here because now you're just declaring that there's a national emergency on everybody. So we could see everybody get overturned just in the timeline that we've seen. Especially, but that would also mean that Congress has to come in and decide that. But with, the United States stock market losing all of this value, I believe the total was $6 trillion in value over 2 days. It would seem like political suicide to not revoke these tariffs that's being placed on everybody. So you would think that there's, of the 500 people in Congress and Senate, how many people are in Congress? Okay. Off the top of my head, I'm pretty fucking good. That's awesome. So, of the 535 members... Oh, okay. I didn't know this distinction. There are 535 members of Congress, 100 serve in the Senate, and 435 serve in the U.S. House of Representatives. If you serve in the U.S. House of Representatives, you're considered a congressman/woman, If you are one of the 100 to serve in the Senate, you are a senator. See, I learned something new today. I learned something today, just to keep up with our South Park references. So of the 535 members of Congress, 100 of them have already shown that they would rather not do tariffs. So now we're waiting to hear if the 435 other people would like to revoke these tariffs. You would think that after this happened, they would grow a spine and they would say, dude, you've already extended past this IEEPA, where it grants you the vague authority to do regulate economic transactions during a national emergency. Well, they would just say that you just don't have the power to do this. Like, it wouldn't really be a vote so much as they are just saying, well, yeah, that's a good point. What would they vote on? I think it would just be more of a everyone comes to senses thing, right? You would hope it would be everybody coming to their senses, at least. But I guess that would be more of a judge thing then. A judge would have to come in and say, but we can look at the precedent that the Senate already did, rebukes Trump's tariffs as some Republicans vote to halt taxes on Canadian imports. So they would basically, Congress, the House of Representatives, would be voting to halt taxes on everyone. Is what they would be voting on. And then they would probably vote on repealing this, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, where like you can't just go around and say declare a vague national emergency and then just start doing trading things with everybody, is what I would imagine happens. But first things first is I think everybody would follow the Senate's lead. But then you also have to realize that this happened in April and they're responding to tariffs from March. So does bureaucracy eventually catch up to how fast Trump is moving? Because in the month it took them just to vote on this, the day after they voted on this, or on Wednesday. So like hours, or no, the day after, because he declared that on Thursday, right? No, it was hours after they did that. So hours after the Senate removes the Canadian tariffs from March, Trump just tariffs the entire world. And the only reason that he got to do that in the first place was using this little loophole. So he's already out of his scope in that. He doesn't really have the power to do, like, the executive order he's using is he's already out of his scope. So they could also make the argument that like he doesn't even have the power to do what he's already done. So, but I guess I don't understand. It didn't because, well, one, Trump was already ahead of this move because he removed the Canadian and Mexican tariffs, right? But this is looking at retrospectively. So, like, right as they were supposed to enable the Canadian tariffs, the Senate said that they weren't going to do it. And then it was going to go to Congress to be voted on, but Congress had already adjourned. However, Trump came out like 2 hours later and said, oh, we're just not going to tariff Canada and Mexico, but we are going to tariff literally everybody else. But yes, the Senate voted to remove it. Then that goes on to Congress. And then if Congress makes that vote, then it should, in theory, like backtrack it. I don't know the exact political process, but I'm just pointing out that there is a majority of senators that don't like the idea of tariffs already, and that was this is from last week. So then now we're waiting to hear about Congress and what they think. And I would believe that if both the Senate and Congress halt taxes on all the tariffs on all these imports, then it would probably go to a judge for review or something else. But there is a way to stop tariffs without Trump just aimlessly going around doing whatever he wants, because there's a checks and balances system in the world for a reason. I mean, if you're not... Let's see. I mean, if you really want to go the route of their pro-fentanyl trafficking, but now that's already like kind of a moot point, right? So they're working on the tariffs from when it was pro-fentanyl trafficking, but that's like a scrapped idea. We're moving forward to this new set of tariffs. At any point has he said these reciprocal tariffs are because of fentanyl? No. He's just doing it because they've let him so far. But the precedent that the Senate made last week says they don't like tariffs in general. So also, if you're using this logic of passing a bill that removes the Canadian and Mexican import tariffs, sounds like it's pro-fentanyl. Trump is the one who removed Mexican and Canadian import tariffs with his new reciprocal tariffs. So with your own line of questioning, Trump is the one who's pro-fentanyl trafficking, right? But all of that is a moot point, because really this is just looking at the Senate has already got a majority that doesn't want tariffs. So now you're looking at Congress. What are they going to respond as? If they have a majority that doesn't want tariffs, then you're at a head. And then you look at it from a market perspective. Is that a good or a bad thing that the U.S. Congress is opposed to the president on his tariffs? And then that would probably come down to the judiciary system. And they would rule that Trump doesn't have the power to pass these tariffs because he doesn't. So whether you slice it in the whatever narrative you want to slice it in, what matters is that, does he have the power to do this in the first place? And he's using this International Emergency Economic Powers Act to say that he has the power to enact tariffs. But then after he initially did it, he kind of threw that whole entire thing out the window and then just went and announced tariffs for no real reason. If it goes back to a judge will say the president can't just declare tariffs on everybody, because you can't. So then all of these tariffs get backtracked after that. So that is kind of what I'm looking at next, is how the U.S. House of Representatives respond to basically what the Senate did last week in response to Trump's tariffs from March. The bureaucracy moves really slow, though, because Trump is already talking about more tariffs on China, and he's negotiating tariffs with 70 other countries in the world. So is the other branches of government going to be too little too late with the checks and balances? I don't know. Based off the reaction of the stock market, it would seem like everybody is already too late. But a 10% correction isn't necessarily a bad thing. Oh my God. Just that 6 month is crazy. So I'm just saying that what, politics aside, despite it being very politically driven, what to look forward, how to look at the stocks moving forward, and what is going to be the news that would more than likely generate big movements going forward, right? Whether or not you feel like someone is pro this or anti that, what matters is how we got here and where we're going, right? And that requires the context of how Trump was able to, without the checks and balances system, announce tariffs, which is this. And then he used that to initially do tariffs on Canada and Mexico and China. And then 2 months after that, he just scrapped that whole entire idea, because he's not even talking about fentanyl and any of that anymore. He's just talking about tariffs on everybody. So now he's not using the loophole that he originally found. So then, and the Senate has already said that they don't like any of this. So now the next upcoming thing is just going to be, how does the U.S. House of Representatives respond? Because if they also have a majority where they don't like these tariffs, and the Senate also has shown that they don't like it, then you're at a head. And then it goes to the judiciary system, and the judiciary system would look at this and say, well, you didn't declare a national emergency against the entire world importing fentanyl into the U.S., and also the people that you did declare a national emergency of importing fentanyl into the U.S., you aren't imposing tariffs on. So none of what is happening is legal according to, the laws of the land. So they would be unwound. It's just that how long does it take, and how much more of this can the market handle before it just implodes? So that's kind of what I'm looking at for like the upcoming month or two, is just how why is it illegal to willy-nilly impose tariffs? Because of the checks and balances system. The U.S. House of Representatives. So according to Congress is the one that has the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source. So Congress is not the President of the United States. Congress is the Senate and the House of Representatives. So he used a loophole to go over everybody's head, because tariffs are a form of tax. So he used a loophole to go over the 535 people whose job it actually is. Tariffs are a tax. It's literally a tax. A tariff is just different because it's a tax imposed on imports at the border. So that's just why it's defined as something different than an actual tax. Well, this. So, throughout history, and you can look at this in my YouTube channel, I have a whole entire thing about the history of tariffs. But tariffs are taxes. They're just on imports from other countries. And throughout history, Congress decides the rate of taxes on everything, including tariffs. There are a few exceptions where the president has been given the chance and options to decide how tariffs are implemented or negotiate tariffs. And because of these precedents, Donald Trump has basically stepped over Congress's head to do this. But the whole entire point, and why it's bad, is that the U.S. has a system of checks and balances. There's three branches of the federal government: the executive branch, which is the president; the legislative branch, which is the Congress; and the judicial branch, which is the head of that would be the Supreme Court. If somebody is given, if any one of those three branches is just doing whatever they want, the other two branches are supposed to be there to check and balance them. So to just declare a tax on the entire world by one branch should be checked by and balanced by the other two branches. So if Trump was able to impose these tariffs while being checked and balanced by Congress and the judicial system, like the Supreme Court, it would be legal, right? as of right now, he skipped over those other two steps. Like with a bill passing, the general order of the bill passing is it goes through the Senate and it gets approved by them. It goes through the House of Representatives, gets approved by them, and then it goes to the president and gets approved by him. And then a bill becomes a law. As of right now, he is just signing executive orders and making laws of the land without any of that process. And that's not how it works. So I'm saying that if we are, like, I'm saying that if we decide that we are going to work the system how it's supposed to work, this is the next step. Is that the Senate has already said that they don't like tariffs. We have yet to hear from the House of Representatives. And if the House of Representatives say that they don't, by majority, say they don't like tariffs, then it goes to the judicial system and they get to decide who is right here. And once it goes to the judicial system, they would say that based off of how the laws are already written, Congress is the ones who are allowed to impose taxes. And the legislative or the executive branch functioned outside of their role, and they overstepped their bounds. So Trump went over his role, used a loophole, and then he didn't use the loophole correctly, and then they would revoke it. That is more than likely what would happen. What would be happening next if the government was functioning how it was supposed to function.